Welcome to What Doesn't Kill Us. I'm Kaija Larke, and my first guest has trekked to the North Pole with Prince Harry, has attempted to summit Mount Everest, and cycled across America. But life wasn't always about extreme adventures. Jaco Van Gass grew up in a hard-working, modest family in South Africa before he flew to the UK to join the British Army. It was on his second tour of Afghanistan when he was hit by an RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade. He suffered life-changing injuries and endured months of rehabilitation and operations. But this summer, he will be competing in every cycling event at the postponed Tokyo Paralympic Games. And I'm delighted to be speaking to him today. Well, Jaco, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast, in finding the time in what must be an absolutely crazy schedule for you right now. How is all the training going for Tokyo?
Yeah, training's going really well, thank you. It's as you say, it's very, very busy at the moment. There's a lot of things to do, especially my schedule. I'm quite in a unique situation where I'll be riding every single event at the Paralympics. From all the track events, which is 3 of them, and then 2 road events. So I've got 5 events I'm kind of needing to prepare for. I'm very mindful of not falling into the jack of all trades, master of none, basically. So I'm focusing only on 2 events, which is the pursuit, the individual pursuit, and the road race for the road. The other events in the middle. Funny enough, that is my very first event and my very last event. So everything in the middle is a bit of let's go and see what we can do, basically. So yeah, but like I say, we still have to tick boxes in terms of training for all of them. So yeah, it's very busy.
They're quite different disciplines as well, aren't they?
Very different disciplines. So yeah, like I say, the kind of the power and aerobic output you need for the track is quite different in, like you say, than what you need for the road, where it's more stamina and endurance. So it's a fine balance I'm having to try and get right, really.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, just stepping back your story to kind of being a young lad growing up in South Africa, could you ever have imagined that one day you'd be representing Team GB at the Paralympics?
Absolutely no is the answer. Have I always had a passion for cycling? Yes, that I can answer. I've always loved being on my bike. From a young kid, my mom would come as well. Like, I'll have a horrible day at school. Not wanting to do my homework, not wanting to study, and my mom would just know. She's like, right, get on your bike, half an hour, and be back here. And that would just clear my mind, and I'm like, burn the energy off, and I'll come in, and I kind of continue and to do what you need to do. But yeah, I've always found the bike as a form of escapism, and love being on it. But to actually be in this position now, to, like you say, to go and represent Great Britain in the Paralympic Games was this is a bit beyond my dreams, really.
So, sort of back when you were kind of late teens, 20ish, you came over to the UK, didn't you? And that's sort of where your journey started, in a sense, wasn't it? You came over actually to join the British Army. Why did you leave South Africa to come and join the army?
It's again, I grew up outdoors. I had a very privileged, amazing upbringing of being outside all the time. My grandparents had a farm, so I spent most of my holidays there. Shooting, running, rugby, football, cricket. Very sporty, very active. But I kind of started realizing, you know what? Opportunities in South Africa is different. It's rare. And I've always had a passion for the army, actually more the police force. And I craved this independence. And my dad was quite strict, your traditional kind of white male in terms of discipline and starting from the bottom. And again, like I say, I worked for him, and I had a very tiny salary. I remember my first day I walked into his office. He's like, here's a and he handed me a paintbrush, and he's like, this office needs painting. And I'm like, what? And he's just like, yeah, that's what you're starting with, a paintbrush. And and literally working my way.
You are going to start right at the bottom, son, before you work your way up. Yeah.
But to be honest, and I look back at it now, I wouldn't have had it any other way. I'm glad he did it that way. But what it has made me realise that I craved independence tremendously after 2 years working for him, and yeah, like I said, I've always had this passion for the outdoors and for the army or just some just activity. And then because we're part of the Commonwealth, that enables every Commonwealth country or country under the Commonwealth to be able to join the British Army. And I looked into that, and I thought that's something I really want to do, and I kind of pursued that. And then got a Schengen visa, came over. I landed a Saturday morning. I think it was like June 2006 or something. And literally the Monday morning, I was in the careers office trying to find out what I want to do and where I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to join the infantry. I didn't know which regiment or whatever it might be. And it's through that I found the parachute regiment, and I pursued that career into the Paras.
And if we sort of fast forward then a couple of years and take you on to 2009, you were on your second tour in Afghanistan by that point with the Paras, and that was when you were injured. You were hit by a rocket-propelled grenade. What do you remember about that?
Yeah, that's right. So it was the back end of our second tour. So I had a mere 2 weeks left in theatre before returning back to the UK. So you can say that's probably one of our kind of cool down, one of our last missions we were potentially going to go on, and a very successful operation, and it's on the way back to where the helicopters were going to pick us up to fly us back to the camp that we came across a Taliban stronghold that was unknown to us within the area. As you mentioned, within about 45 minutes, intensive firefight, I got hit by the RPG, by the rocket-propelled grenade. And I remember quite a bit. I remember the blast, and then there's a bit of a gap in between. And then I remember coming back to kind of hearing the guys firing, thinking I need to get back into the firefight. And it's by trying to sit back up and also return fire that I then realized the extent of my injuries and the loss of my arm. So I actually remembered, my arm being blown off, basically. I tried to apply self-help by putting on a tourniquet. I couldn't do that sufficiently. And luckily, one of my teammates, a guy called Reese, crawled over. He saw after the blast that I wasn't where I was supposed to be, because the blast actually blew me away from my original position. Yeah. He came crawling over, helped me with the tourniquet, and then he radioed in for the medic. And then I received life-saving medical treatment. Amazing job what these guys do. And again, it's a training we go through. From Reese actually coming over and then applying that tourniquet, the correct manner. To then think on his feet. Let's get the medic in, and then starting applying some medical treatment. And then I was kind of a bit of in and out of consciousness, and I can remember actually the helicopters coming in, getting into the helicopter. Still in quite a severe firefight. I remember clearly as well the helicopter the door gunner having to actually neutralize quite a lot of the enemy. So a bit of like an action movie, to be honest. And it's once on the helicopter that I kind of had a bit of a ease in myself as well, going, I'm going home. And it was almost like, whether that's dead or alive, I'm safe to a degree. We're going back. And that's when I kind of relaxed and I lost consciousness. And then before I knew it, I think it's 6 days later, I woke up in Sedok Hospital out of an induced coma. So big gap there. On the night, I remember quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, it's amazing, sort of vivid memories, isn't it? I didn't expect that you actually remembered quite that much. And it's obviously you've talked about your arm, but actually you suffered a huge number of other injuries as well, didn't you?
Well, I think that was the shock, really, to be honest, waking up in Sedok Hospital, because it was the fact that I've seen it that night. There's already like a click in the brain going, you've been injured and it's been your arm. And then I kind of came out of this induced coma, again, very confused about where I am. My last clear memory was being in that firefight. Now I wake up in a hospital bed, and there's my friends' families, my family's faces, familiar faces that shouldn't be in Afghanistan, because at that moment, I was still in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
It took a lot of convincing from them to go, you're safe, you're back in the UK. And yeah, so suddenly waking up and then going, okay, I realised about the arm, that's fine, box tick. But what's going on with my leg? Why is my leg in a splint? Why have I got a colostomy? I didn't even know what a colostomy is. I just had this bag on the side of my tummy. Why have I got bandages and plasters and stuff everywhere else? And that's when the realization settled in, going, okay, well, I've lost a third of muscle and tissue on my left upper thigh. I fractured my knee. I fractured my ankle. Collapsed left lung. Shrapnel wounds to my left side, which ripped my internal organs apart. So hence the reason the colostomy. I woke up with this horrific scar down, from just underneath my ribs all the way down to my belly button, where they had to take all my internal organs out, place them on the table, go through them one by one, picking out the shrapnel, sewing it back up, and then putting it back in. So, you think about this and you're like, okay, wow, yeah, recovery is going to take a lot longer than what I thought in my mind. Because in my mind, I was like, I know prosthetics is quite advanced. I'm going to get something with an arm that can hold a rifle, and within a month, I'll build up a bit of fitness.
I'll be back out there.
And I'll be back out there. And literally, that was the process in my mind. And then you wake up, and you then look down on yourself, and you go, whoa, this is going to be a lot longer than expected.
Yeah. So, I mean, such complex physical injuries, but what were the mental injuries that came with that as well?
Yeah, the mental injuries as well. Like I say, it's weird how it kind of creeps up on you, because at that moment in time, I can't say that I suffered. I've had extremely vivid and kind of vital dreams, violent dreams. But I think that was a combination of obviously the brain sorting out what's going on, combined with the drugs, especially the morphine and stuff. Everything's hyperinflated. Waking up, going, so convinced that again, just being within a fighting scene and having to ask my family and friends questions to kind of get a better perspective of what I've just dreamed and what's the truth and what isn't, and the difference between the dream and not. But at that moment, you're so surrounded by support. You're just in this unbelievable bubble of love, and your family's there, your mum is there, my sister's there, and you've got the nurses looking after you, you've got friends and family constantly coming in and looking after you. I wasn't literally. I would look at a cup of water, and someone would, oh, are you thirsty? And then bring the water over, and the nurses will. Amazing treatment, but as the weeks and the days kind of go past, people have to return to their normal lives, and the visiting stops, and or there's less of them, or it's less frequent. And again, a new patient comes in, and the nurses, all their attention is on them to these guys survive and start healing up. And it's once everyone, like I said, there comes a point where my family had to fly back to South Africa. My sister had to go back to London for a job and stuff like that. So suddenly you find yourself quite alone and with a lot of time to think. And that's when the mental trauma really settles in. And there was times where I did wonder, why did I survive? Asking questions, why it happened to me? Where would I have been better off dead? You work through them, and I think it's healthy to. I've asked myself questions. I was in a very dark place, but again, there was support around it, and I found the support mostly from my family. Yes, there was support from the system and from the army, but I just needed to talk to people that was much closer to me to figure this out, and with myself as well. I had to kind of gave myself two options basically, and one was to give up, and one is to crack on with life, and not be afraid to ask for help. And I kind of chose the latter, and it really did that stepping stone to everything else that came.
Yeah, and in sort of during that recovery sort of pathway. You know, it's at that point, kind of 2009, 2010. You know, there were a lot of soldiers that were going through that recovery pathway, being injured, particularly in Afghanistan. But during your recovery, you then sort of rediscovered sport, if you like. How much did that kind of help you with that mindset change and that? Do you know what? I'm not going to sit here and kind of feel sorry for myself about what's happened. I'm actually going to crack on, like you say.
Yeah, you're right. Sport really, really, really. I think across the board, sport is just that. You know, you can speak to any soldier, anyone that's veteran that's been injured in some form or way, be that mental or physical. I think would find some resound kind of therapy through sport and a new life, really. And that's exactly what happened to me. It driven me to kind of set myself new goals and new challenges. And basically, I think the biggest thing for me, the switching point for me, was acceptance. And I think that is really, really important because for a long while, as I just said, you know, as I explained, I had this vision in my head of, okay, I'll just put a prosthetic on and I'll be back on the ground. Okay, that's not going to be happening. But the goal was always getting back to Afghanistan. The goal was always being back to being a soldier. And that was a missing link between my body and my mind because my body just knew that's not going to happen.
That's not happening. Yeah.
But my mind was like, yeah, but no, but you know, this is this. I can, you know, I'm sure I can have someone else change my magazine for me, and I can, you know, it was all about what I wanted really, and then suddenly I realized, but because it's all, am I, having been in a firefight, having been in a scenario, a second or 2 seconds is a lifetime in those scenarios, because if it's going to take me, let's say 4 more seconds longer to change the magazine, that means a guy next to me on my left or my right needs to be 4 more seconds exposed to the enemy to then cover me. And that's them putting their lives at risk just because Jaco wanted to come back and play soldier with one arm. And I realized that is not the right thing to do. So once I accepted what happened to me, it's like someone pushed a fast forward button, because then suddenly that link between my brain and my mind and my body was there, going, okay, your career potentially in the army is done, but let's go and see what we can and can't do. So it's almost like a new challenge. It's like, can I still do?
So what now?
Yeah, can I do some of the activities I used to do or used to love? Yes or no? And then obviously by filtering that out, it led to putting on other challenges and other kind of activities. Oh, I've never skied in my life. Let's go and learn to ski. I've never done this, climbing, whatever it might be. And then, like I say, that kind of followed on to everything else.
But I mean, when you say challenges, Jaco, what you actually mean is becoming a first-class skier. What you mean is in 2011, 2 years after you've been injured, being one of the team members for the Walking with the Wounded, first, you know, injured guys, unaided, trekking to the North Pole with Prince Harry. You mean the following year attempting to summit Mount Everest. I mean, you know, these are not the level of challenges that most of us might think to take on under the circumstances.
Yeah, I have taken some of this stuff to some of the extreme degrees, to be very honest. But the opportunity was there for it. So, and I think it's just my nature as well. I do kind of tend out to go, right, I need to really push myself. Right? This is a really new challenge. And especially and all those things you mentioned is stuff I've never done in my life. So I do really throw myself into them and try to be the best I possibly can in those scenarios. But I think it's also important that people need to know that they don't need to go to that extremes. You know, that even if a challenge is by, you know, leaving your sofa and going to the corner shop to buy a pint of milk, if you're finding that a struggle, that is perfectly fine. And overcoming that challenge is as significant as attempting Everest and, you know, walking to the North Pole and stuff like that. It's just, we all have different levels of where we see ourselves in those spaces.
So then you were involved in the first Invictus Games organised by Prince Harry. Was that when cycling kind of came back on the agenda for you?
Yeah, exactly that. Pretty much so, really. Obviously, having served in the army, the role we played within the parachute regiment at that time as well didn't really involve us to or allow us to do any kind of sport or out kind of door side activities apart from your normal basic army fitness training kind of stuff, your runs, your tabs, and everything else apart from that. And I've always had that passion for cycling. So then, obviously, yes, the Invictus Games came in, and it was an event I really wanted to partake in. I was highly inspired by the games in London, and cycling was always, like I said, a passion for me. So then, having that motivation to train for that was phenomenal, and it was that's kind of what I say, kind of brought me back into that cycling, that love for cycling. And then having then received really good results in both London and then further on in Orlando as well. And that kind of set quite a good foundation for me to kind of build from there to almost like where we are now.
And you kind of had to sort of almost learn to cycle again in that sort of competitive way, didn't you? Because you don't wear a prosthetic sort of in day to day, but you were kind of learning to sort of try and balance on your bike kind of initially without one, weren't you?
Correct, yeah. So I started off using no prosthetics whatsoever. And it's during some training rides. And at this stage, I was still based in Wales. So on the little small country lanes, rough roads, cars whizzing past me, all cycling with one arm, having to brake as well. And it's usually raining as well. So I kind of then figured out that actually, if I could use and spread the weight between both my shoulders,
Yeah.
it will most likely be better and I'll be more stable on the bike. And then that's when the use of prosthetics on sporting equipment became more relevant for me to be using. But on a day-to-day basis, I still don't use a prosthetic, mostly actually just for cycling and in the gym.
And then you kind of sort of kept up with the cycling and sort of took on kind of various challenges, didn't you? Now, in 2017, that's when we first met, when you were one of the team of wounded, injured and sick personnel doing the race across America, the world's toughest cycling endurance race, not taking things easy, again, Jaco, going kind of coast to coast, less than a week as part of a team. That was really tough for so many reasons. It was such an epic challenge. What did you kind of learn from that in terms of your training, your cycling, your abilities that you're kind of taking into this summer's games?
Yeah, like you say, it was really a very tough race. I'm very glad and very happy to have been part of that team, and again, just phenomenal effort from all the teammates. For what we've done and what we've achieved on that event. The race across America really opened my eyes again in terms of both the how far we as individuals and athletes can actually push ourselves mentally and physically. Going through a whole rotation of sleep deprivation, from riding in something like 37, 38 degrees plus, and then as you go further across into more headwinds, into more torrential rain areas and everything, but literally getting yourself out on the bike, pushing forward, knowing why you're doing it. It really opened my eyes again that if you had that goal, and the end goal was to get to the other side of America in a certain amount of time, that you are willing to do whatever it takes to do that. So that's the reason why, and I've always done that as well, within mostly actually since getting injured, is having a purpose for what I'm doing something. So having that end goal, whether that was the end goal to get out of my wheelchair was to walk again. So everything I needed to do to get out of that wheelchair to walk again. From then it was okay, right, I've achieved that, look back on it, actually give yourself a pat on the back for having done that. So what's the next goal? Okay, I can walk again. So let's get back to running, to then set myself a target for a half marathon. And then that's how it constantly went. And I think the race across America just really kind of exposed that again and really kind of lightened that up, that it's so important. If you have that goal, you ride through 30-degree heat plus and whatever situation there is,
And there was every extreme, wasn't there? Because you were crossing mountain ranges, you had the long straight flats of Kansas, you had Arizona, you had really high temperatures and dry weather, really cold, damp weather. I mean, it was everything that could have been thrown at you in that week, wasn't it?
I think the only thing we missed that week, literally, probably was snow. Everything else in between,
I
we
think
had
we saw snow on some of the mountaintops, but yeah, didn't actually ride through it.
definitely saw snow. But like I say, I think apart from that, that was the only thing that was actually missing. But yeah, like I say, so having that end goal to try and your absolute best to achieve that goal, to go in, break that record, or set a new faster time, or whatever it might be. And it's very similar to my training now. There's days that I really don't want to get on the bike. There's days where my body is so tired, and I do look out the window, and it is raining and it's coming in sideways. But I have to think about that end goal of about winning gold in Tokyo. That's the only reason, and that kind of drags me out of the house and onto my bike. And it's those times and those situations where that will pay off. Like one day later on in August this year.
Yeah. And was it really then kind of post the race across America? I mean, you'd already been involved with Team GB prior to that in the run up to the Rio Games, but was it really kind of post the race across America where you then kind of went, right, sight set, Team GB, next Paralympic Games, I'm going for it?
You know what? No, actually, the race across America was actually one of those where I wanted to do more of it. I wanted to go and do other extreme challenges like that. And I've actually gone off to do that. I've then gone off to ride through Patagonia, 1,000 kilometers on bikepacking. I've gone and do a 6-day stage race in South Africa, a mountain bike race with another good friend of mine, Stu Croxford. So almost the race across America kind of lightened that area that I want to do more of up quite a bit. But what it has done, and all these other challenges, is usually they're either quite early in the year or pretty late in the year. So nothing really in between, which is perfect because either I go on a challenge and I come back extremely fit, and then I go into the race season, and then I get really good results. And then I go off and I represent Great Britain as an independent rider. I get good results. I actually make the qualifying criteria to then go to something like the World Championships, which I then went off to. And then I come back from there, getting good results, again, winning medals. So either becoming a world champion or winning either a first, second, or third. And it's then when the realization of Tokyo, potentially going to Tokyo, kind of came in. But I was still kind of quite focused on just doing my own thing and racing, doing what I love, and then going off racing at the highest level, and then coming back and doing my own thing. And I love that pattern, and I followed that pattern for probably about 3 years. But it's not until actually really late 2019, when again I came back from another expedition, actually the Cape Epic, the mountain bike race, when I then went off to win, to get second in the Road World Championships. So then that was a really good platform for me to start thinking, because we're about a year out there from Tokyo. And then the kind of cock started turning. I then kept training, and then I went onto the track, onto the velodrome. And again, I made all the qualifications to then go and represent Great Britain as an independent rider in Canada.
You're still independent at this point. You haven't got the backing, all of that nutritional support, physio support, training support of Team GB. You're still doing it independently at this point.
All independently, all my own nutrition, my own funding, having to buy my own tickets, my own bikes and equipment, everything. So totally independent. And then we went off in January, because usually the track world championships is usually held in March, but because of a Paralympic year, they moved it closer to January in 2020. And then I went off, and I came back from Canada a 3-time world champion, having won three races. And gosh, I came back with a ton of medals. 3-time world champion. and two silver. Two silver
Amazing.
medalists as well. So in the individual pursuit and in the team sprint. So that was really like the opener where I went, okay, Tokyo really looks like it could be on the cards. British Cycling then talked to me and say, listen, with this performance, you will be highly likely to go. Would you want to come back onto the program? And that's when I then stepped back onto the program to relieve some of the pressure. As I said, as an independent, I've got to find funding. I've got to look after myself constantly. It's also the stuff off the bike. So, your massages, your physiotherapy, trying to stay injury-free, stuff like that. So by taking that pressure off myself to then jump onto the team where I would get that support just made sense. So since basically kind of January 2020, I was back on the GB team.
And the way you talk about it, I mean, it sounds like you just really fallen back in love with cycling.
I definitely have, exactly that. And what I love about it is the fact that I'm riding multiple disciplines. I'm getting on any bike that I like, and the most important thing is I'm enjoying it. And I think that was that is still for me the most important thing is enjoyment I really get out of cycling. And as long as I can keep that fire burning, then I think the results will come for that. And it's when I lose that, or that flame kind of dampers down a little bit, that's when it gets hard, and suddenly you start asking yourself various questions. So keeping that flame alive and the enjoyability with it comes results.
So you've got your place within the Team GB squad. You're doing all the training. You're mind focused, ready for Tokyo 2020. Then there's a global pandemic, and everything kind of pauses. And obviously there was. It wasn't a surprise when the games were postponed. There'd been a lot of talk about it in the run up. But what was that like? You've got your mind really focused, your training's on point, and then suddenly the games are postponed, and that's it. It's kind of been snatched from you again.
Yeah, really hard, as you say. From this point on, I think it's nearly 8 years of kind of having that dream to go to Rio, and then all my focus, all my attention towards that, then not making it, then making that decision to leave the program, to then do my own thing for another couple of years. And then, to then get to a point where I'm like, wow, I'm in such a better place than the previous cycle. So excited to potentially go. And then the pandemic hit, and it's another year on, and you're like, God, how much do I need to do what do I need to do just to get on a plane and become a Paralympian? So it was quite a bitter pill to swallow. I was in really good shape. I was very, very, very focused on what I needed to do to go and perform to the best of my ability. And I think it was about probably a week or even 10 days after the announcement was made, and it was definite that the Games was not going to happen in 2020. That I was still, it didn't sink in. I was still training very hard. I was still following my training plan to the T, and I was breaking myself. And it's about, like I say, about day 10, where it's like, why am I doing this? And then suddenly the penny kind of dropped, going, from that moment on, we still have 18 months to the next Games. So it was a very long time. So, it was then just a matter of reset, kind of look at where we are, actually take a little bit of time off, and then work back from that date all the way back to go, okay, well, how do we again perform on, August 28th at the best?
And that must be so hard to you've got weeks or months, to when you think you need to be at peak fitness, and then you've suddenly got kind of 18 months. Just to sort of sidetrack for a moment, just want to ask you a little bit about the classifications, because a lot of people don't understand the classifications for the Paralympics, do they? Can you just explain that really briefly for me?
It is a difficult one to explain sometimes, or for people to understand. And we totally understand that it's not also always all that clear. So it's like anything. So there's different categories. So there's handbikes, there's trikes, and then there's tandems, and then there's uprights, and they all have different different levels within their category. So the handbikes are H1 or H2. Blind, B is for blind, so that's the tandem classification. So I'm in a C classification, so I'm a C3 rider, So again, we have 5 levels. So a C1 to a C5, and a C1 being the most impaired, the most injured, and that will be your severely cerebral palsy kind of athletes, and multiple injuries as well. And a C2 class is probably just a little bit lighter cerebral palsy. And then from your C3 class, of which I'm in, there's a lot of more kind of, again, a number of injuries. It's usually guys with multiple injuries, like myself, with an arm and a leg, and various other smaller injuries on top of that. And then there might be someone with a different impairment and a limb missing. And then you go to your kind of higher standard classifications where it's a C4 and a C5. So C4 category is usually lower limbs. It's if you've lost a leg below the knee, or you've got something wrong with your ankle or whatever it might be. And then your C5s is usually, majority of them is your upper body classification. So only one arm missing, or something with a tricep, or something like that. But these are your higher, these guys are pretty much able-bodied to a degree, very, very close to very high standard of cycling. So sometimes you will actually see a rider and you can't physically see an impairment on him. So because, like I say, it's something actually so minor, but it's still classifiable to be able to ride within the Paralympic or within a paracycling environment.
It's quite complex to understand, isn't it? And I mean, normally in the run up to a games, you would be all over the world. You would be racing, competing all the time as part of your training. But obviously, because of the pandemic, lots of events haven't been happening, have they? So that must have been really difficult.
It's very frustrating because again, you look at the calendar. We should have really been racing a great deal more. And racing is important because it kind of, you build certain skills when you're racing, sitting in a big bunch next to each other, and those skills fade away the less you do it. So it's good to do that. But yes, still having had really good results, it does show that the form is still there. The training I've been doing is it's working, it's coming in. But I'm very mindful. For me, all my focus is for that one day, that individual pursuit. I think it's the 28th of August. That I focus on. So yes, I'm still getting results now, but even if I didn't, I won't be too bothered about it because it's a slow build to make sure that we peak at that one day or during that week of the Paralympic Games. So it's making sure that you're happy with where you are at the moment.
I mean, it's sort of crazy for the rest of us to think about how do you manage that? How do you kind of focus so that, like you say, you are at your absolute peak. Your fitness is there, your mindset is there, everything is absolutely at its best on that one day that's still, a few months in advance. How do you stay focused? Do you have any kind of rituals? What do you have to do? How do you kind of keep your mind where it needs to be?
Yeah, it's a lot harder than what people probably think it potentially is. And it's like you say, it's staying motivated, it's staying passionate about it all. And I think for me, I think I mentioned it earlier, is enjoyment. I need to enjoy what I'm doing. And I know there's days where I'm going to have to get on that bike and I'm probably going to hate every second of it, of the whole 3-4 hours of it, because it's such a certain exercise or effort that I need to do. But it's also knowing that I know why I'm doing that. And then, like I say, and then to have other days to then really go enjoy my riding, whether it's on a specific bike or a specific event or whatever it might be. But I think for me, it's as long as I have that joy, the enjoyment of it and the passion for it, then actually doing it over and over and over again isn't such a big chore for me. So I think that's the most important thing. Is the last time I went through this process, I really didn't enjoy it. I thought I was so focused actually on cycling that everything else in my life gave way. Where this time I'm very aware of that I can still go and do something with my fiance. I don't just have to ride my bike and then sit on a couch to recover. And that's all. There's a life outside of cycling, and I think that's really important. That I need to have a balance between the preparations and normal life as well. And I think that's really the key that I have now, and that I've got a good balance with.
Yeah. And I have to ask, do you think you would have achieved half of the things that you have done had you not been injured?
Honest answer, no. If it wasn't for my injury, I would not have had the opportunities to go off to do these amazing challenges and to meet the amazing people I've done, that I've met, and the friends I've made along the way. And actually, some of the inspirational people that I've also, that I take inspiration from, came across my path due to the injury. So I really don't regret getting injured, and like I said, I'm actually quite grateful for the path it has actually taken me on to.
And what would be your little nugget of advice for anybody who has maybe more recently experienced life-changing injuries or a life-changing event and can't maybe quite see the path beyond where they are now?
It's a good question, and there's so many different ways to put it. But I think there's two things I want to say. So my mom always said, and I hated it when she did say, and she was always right, that something happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. And at that very moment in time when it happens, doesn't matter how bad, even getting blown up and losing an arm, you can't think of worse scenarios. You would think, why would this happen to me? But like I say, I'm sitting here now going, if that didn't happen to me, I would not be here today
Yeah.
on the way, to Tokyo. And it's because of that and everything along the way. So that's kind of just a little more just advice in terms of nugget of if something that something came over to you in your life that you're struggling to deal with it, is that there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And I think I would say my biggest advice is reach out to the people around you, the people closest to you. Don't be afraid of asking for help. um, it's so important to kind of reach out and ask for help, and don't think that you should do everything on your own. We're not here on this earth to be alone. We're here to help and support each other. So there is help up there, in whichever way it is and scenario you're in. But don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't think you need to deal with everything on your own.
Really, really good advice there, and obviously the wisdom of your mum still riding through there. So obviously the focus very much now is on the summer, is on Tokyo, is everything that will happen in that week in August. But beyond that, what does the future hold? Do you have eyes on another prize beyond that, or is the mindset, is the focus there very much just on Tokyo right now?
You know what? I usually will have something beyond that, and I think I've been advised as well by other people that has been to events like these, or games where they're like, it's actually very important to have something afterwards, because it's that coming down kind of from such a high and such a hype and stuff like that, that it's good to have something to follow up on beyond, whether it's another bike ride or whatever it might be. But in terms of actual activity, I'm not sure. No, there's a lot of stuff I have in my mind. I've not put something to paper or actually action something to actually go, I'm writing this or I'm taking on this challenge. There is a little bit of actually just I would enjoy some downtime. We had to postpone our wedding this year as well in April. Sorry, last year. And so that's now postponed till next year. So actually, I think that's the one thing I really look forward to actually
Yeah.
have that amazing day, spend a day with friends and family, and with my wife. So that's one. And obviously, with current situations, it's so uncertain, and if we can just get that out of the way, that would be amazing. So yeah.
Well, Jaco, the absolute very, very best of luck in Tokyo. 28th of August, did you say was your first race?
Yes, around there. Yeah, it's 26th or 28th. It's around. It's that back end of August there. Yeah.
But plenty of opportunities to watch you on the TV, to cheer you on of your various different events.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll be 3 days going straight. So 3 days in a row, 2 days off, and then another 2 days in a row. So yeah, very busy schedule coming up. So plenty of. Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. Well, yeah, the best of luck with what's left of your training program in the run up to flying out to Tokyo, and yeah, we will absolutely be cheering you on.
Thank
Thank you so much for talking to me today, and for all your time. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
That was Jaco Van Gass and his remarkable story of recovery. Well, the Paralympic cycling events are due to start on the 25th of August, so be sure to cheer Jaco and the rest of Team GB on. Now, my next guest on the podcast has a very different story to tell. Growing up in a house full of sex and drug abuse, her mother was a prostitute who first sold her for sex at the age of 4. She spent her early adulthood in and out of Holloway Prison, but now Mandy Ogunmoken helps vulnerable women as they leave prison life behind themselves.
To be fair, I was laughing because as I was running down that red carpet bit and they was blowing the trumpets, I was laughing. I said, God, you're so funny. I was a heroin, crack addict, thief and a prostitute, and look at me now.
And you can listen to Mandy's story now. If you like what you've heard so far on the podcast, then please subscribe and review or leave a comment. And you can find out more on all the usual social media platforms.